Welcome to the podcast. With me today is Janelle Matthews, who is Senior VP of Solution Strategy, no less, at Genesis. Hi Janelle, how are you doing?
I'm super. How are you, Adrian?
I'm very well. So, Janelle, can you tell us a little bit about Genesis and tell us a bit about you and the work that you do, just so we can fill in our listeners?
Absolutely. So I'll start with Genesis. I've been with Genesis for a little over 12 years now. We are the world's #1 provider of customer experience platforms. And what that means is that we empower companies to create exceptional omni-channel experiences within customer journeys that they make memorable through lasting relationships. We've done that for over 25 years. We put the customer at the center of all we do, and we passionately believe that great customer engagement drives great business outcomes.
Now, we were connected by the good folks at Enterprise 360, and they told me about some of the things that you're doing and the successes that you're having with your clients, and particularly how they're improving service and customer and employee experience. Technology is fascinating and really useful. Here's the thing though, it changes all of the time and there's all sorts of different new technology all of the time. So what I'm really interested in is some examples of some of the cool stuff that you're helping your clients achieve. Those sort of stories really bring the capabilities of what you can do to life, if that makes sense.
So let me give you a few of those examples, just
Awesome.
some of many. We have over 4,500 different customers across the world, but one of the ones that sticks out top of mind to me is from a conversation I had with one of our customers. He was the vice president of customer experience for a large telecommunications company in Canada. And what he said to me really stuck out. He said that Genesis has enabled them to support their customer experience vision, that our technology has allowed them to care from end to end for their customers. How they did that was by transitioning from a call center to a multi-channel contact center to really a true omni-channel engagement center where they put the customer in the center and the surrounding interaction channels around the customer, but are passing context seamlessly, whether their end customer contacts them through the web, through their mobile application, by phone, or even through other channels like email or SMS or joint co-browse sessions. And to your comment about business benefits, these have been tremendous for this large telco in the sense that they're leaders in their industry now. And the 9 months since they made that shift to an omni-channel engagement center have reduced their customer churn by less than 1%. And that's just tremendous for a large telecommunications company where the market they're in is very competitive and often commoditized. So they really use customer experience to differentiate themselves
So
there.
let me get this right. You're saying to me that they've almost eradicated their customer churn?
Yeah.
That's cool. Because I mean, kind of like
Very cool.
in kind of mobiles and telecoms, I mean, like some of the customer churn stuff gets into double digits and sometimes into so horrific 25, 30% sort of churn rate. So to almost eradicate it, that's tremendous. And if I think about it from a customer perspective, does that also kind of mean that I think about lots of things through customer eyes, one, because I am one, but because also I'm trying to advocate on the behalf of customers and good outcomes for customers. Because I know that there's many customers that get frustrated because they might text a company, they might email a company, they might call a company, they might kind of do live chat with a company, and actually none of this sort of stuff is joined up. In the customer's mind, all they're doing is having a conversation with one organization, but in many cases the organization ends up feeling that there's 4 or 5 conversations going on at the same time. Is it what you're saying is that actually that all kind of gets all sucked into one platform and then it's all, if you like, synchronized and integrated and things, so that actually the agents that you have in your engagement center can see that actually you've got a conversation that's happening over possibly 4 or 5 different channels, but it actually looks like one sort of stream and therefore it's coordinated, as it were.
It's not about the interaction anymore. It's not even about the conversation. It's about being able to support the customer seamless end to end across the entire journey.
Okay.
And as customers are using more and more channels every day, being able to know where they're at in that journey and pass context every step along the way to the self-service engine at the time or the employee serving the customer is absolutely critical. You're spot on with that one single orchestration engine to be able to do that.
We used to call them call centers, then they were called contact centers, and now they're called engagement hubs or centers. I mean, I don't know where we're at sometimes. I mean, whether it's multi-channel, omni-channel. It's lots of different channels and people that need to kind of serve the customers, I guess. And it's that sometimes contact centers or engagement centers have got a really bad sort of rep, but they play a huge part in the delivery of the overall customer experience. Because some of these organizations have been around for so long, they find it very hard to transform the contact centers. There's a lot of legacy systems and so on and so forth. Can you give me your view on what you think enterprises can be doing to boost their customer experience in the contact center? Because the number of channels are proliferating kind of madly, and it's becoming ever more kind of complex. I mean, I guess complexity sort of rails against sort of decision making and action and stuff. So what would you recommend companies, organizations, enterprises sort of do to create momentum, can create action to improve the customer experience that their contact centers are delivering?
Let me answer that by starting with some specific trends. So I would bet that companies out there, their customers, about 75% of them, are already on the web when they're engaging with them. And that about 35% of those customers are using 4 channels or more to engage with them. That said, though, over half of those still prefer the voice channel for handling those more complex issues where they need to have that conversation. It's not simple enough to do just through self-service.
Sure.
While these channels are proliferating, voice will also never go away, but you need to consider voice not just as a secondary channel in your communications that is set in a silo in your engagement centers. It needs to be fully integrated with your digital channels as well. And the increase in usage of channels that is only going to continue to grow requires that outside in omni-channel thinking. Let me explain that a little bit more. So when I sit down with companies all over the globe, there's typically that feeling of, okay, I know that I need to transition to more of an omni-channel environment. I know that that's the right thing to do for my business. That's the right thing to do for my customer. I don't know where to start, right? They have this feeling of being completely overwhelmed. In answering your question, I answer it in a way on where to start. And that's really to sit down and really work with a team of experts that are specialized in mapping out your customer journeys. And I think that there's some key tips to do that. One, I would say pick the persona that you want to focus the journey around, because the journeys can vary depending on your customer segments that you're serving. So pick an individual persona, usually one that you want to drive growth around for your business, one that might already be really profitable for you. Then I would say storyboard out the journeys themselves. Oftentimes, as an example, customers start with that onboarding journey and what that looks like. And then beyond the storyboard, some companies just stop there in their journeys. I would take it 2 levels down from there. I would then map out the interaction channels that your customers are all using in every step of the way through that storyboard. And then lastly, map out the emotional journey or emotion curve that your customer is going through and that particular persona each step of the way, because there's some key elements to look for in that emotional journey. So when we talk about exceptional experiences, that doesn't mean you want to create necessarily this emotional journey that has just exceptional experience every single step of the storyboard, because let's face it, that's really expensive to do. It's not really necessary, but where you really want to align those exceptional experiences are to what your brand values are as a company, because that's what's going to make you stand out. And then also at the end of the journey, making sure from the perspective of the customer remembering, making sure that that journey ends on a high note. So that's my long way of saying be omni-channel focused in your customer journeys, map out your as-is journeys, then be critical and focused on what you want your to-be journeys to be, how you can optimize those key steps and create those exceptional experiences. But don't even start or have the journeys themselves be the deliverable. Take those journeys as the facilitation tool to lead into your phased roadmap that is going to be be aligned to the financial justification, the business case to go with that, align it to the blueprint of what do you need from a people, process, technology point of view in order to enable those journeys themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, if I can summarize it, so it's like it all starts with customer journey mapping. Within that, it all starts with pick a really valuable customer segment or persona that represents a segment and start there. Because sometimes people go journey mapping, oh, brilliant. They start journey mapping and think, well, how are we going to represent all these different customers? But what you're saying is start with one because you learn by doing, I guess. And it's best to learn by doing with a valuable persona because you understand the rationale for why you're doing that. You either want to protect it, you want to grow it, you want to do something that makes sense for the organization for it. But then I guess the second thing I would say that comes to mind when I'm thinking about that is that how much would you want to get your customers involved in actually that sense checking that or involved in developing that journey map?
I think that an important part of mapping out those journeys is to triangulate your discovery portion of that journey mapping and using a variety of different ways to get to the bottom of what the actual journey is. So that could involve things like listening to recordings in your contact center where you're hearing the voice of the customer. That could involve things like surveys, even focus groups. That could be you immersing yourself as a customer of the company yourself and providing your own experiences. So it's all around combining data that you have with things like interviews or observations or surveys from the customer point of view as you embark on creating those journeys.
I would actually going to go further and say anybody who's involved in the journey mapping sort of exercise, particularly if you're dealing with if you like a contact center or engagement center interface, I would get all of that journey mapping team and I would put them on the phones or in the channels or either managing email or live chat or all these different things to get that sort of sheep dip immersion experience. And then you go, and then go, that'll scare the living daylights out of them. Now you can go and workshop the journey map because then I guess the experience becomes absolutely real, very visceral in many ways.
Totally. And I think it will also drive urgency when they do those things, right?
Scare the living bejesus out of them. Picking up on one thing that you kind of said earlier, you kind of talked about how things being expensive and channels and stuff and the proliferation of channels that I mentioned earlier. And I know that many firms are trying to push or migrate their customers into lower cost to serve channels. Now, whilst I understand the economics behind of all that, I know that anybody that feels pushed into doing something generally doesn't like it. People, we don't like being pushed around. We don't like being told that we can't do something, and then sometimes we react against it. It has, particularly in a relationship with a business, it can have an impact on our overall experience and retention. So I'd be keen to understand your client's experience. What are kind of almost like best practice, or what are some tips around what are some really good ways to migrate or help migrate your customers into lower cost to serve channels? I mean, is that just a lot to do with education rather than eliminating choice?
It has some to do with education and eliminating choice, but it's not just that. So when it comes to moving towards self-service, some of the tips that I would share is that don't just look at it from the perspective of deflecting the customer or containing the customer in a particular channel. When I meet with companies out there who come to the table, wanting to drive down costs and wanting to have more containment, I get a little bit nervous and a little bit worried that they're not putting the customer in the center of this, because it's not about containment. It's about the customer, and it's about capturing the context of the customer to then drive to the next best action, which could be keeping them in self-service, or it could be helping them to transition to the best channel to get their problem resolved.
Sure.
So it's also not just about the IVR. Like, I think a lot of people still think about self-service as your voice response system, but also broaden it out to think about how you can foster self-service on the web and in the mobile channels as well. Make it laser focused around something that is easy for the customer and beneficial to the customer to do via self-service. I don't know about you, but when I go to the airport, I'm all about using those little kiosks to check in because it's easier than standing in line to talk to someone to get the same thing done. So if you make it easy for the customer, they will adopt self-service, they will use self-service, and they will see self-service as a benefit. I also think that it's important that even if you can get partway through solving their issue with self-service, there are still huge benefits to be gained there, and then transferring the context to that next channel. So for example, if I'm on a company's mobile application and I've already identified myself, I've already authenticated myself, let's say it's a banking application, and I need to then talk to a resource in the contact center or somebody in the branch, and I click to dial within my mobile application, well, then you shouldn't re-ask me who I am and to re-authenticate myself and why I'm contacting you, because you should already have that information from the mobile application. And what we've seen, especially with financial services institution, is even capturing that much can shave minutes off the call and still drive towards objectives around reducing costs while at the same time improving service.
It just reminds me of there's a statistic that comes from the Corporate Executive Board. They did a study back a few years ago, I think it might have been back in 2010, where they said up to 60% of all calls into contact centres are as a result of somebody not being able to find the information that they require to answer their question, either on your website or in your mobile app. For me, the lesson is do your homework and do the work. And if you do, then you'll kind of benefit in the long run.
I guess just to add a couple more points on that, also don't even just consider self-service as inbound, but also consider self-service around proactive,
of course,
omni-channel outbound communications. Being predictive, being proactive, and giving the customer the information that they need based on where they're at in your journey can offset them even having to take any action to your web or mobile or voice channels.
That all sounds great and it's very exciting, but then when we talk about contact centers generally, there's a bit of an elephant in the room, I think, when it comes to this, because actually traditionally within a contact center there's been a very, very high turnover rate of people and staff and things, and then there's all this kind of recruitment and training impact associated with that, and how that has an impact on the level of service and experience that we kind of deliver. I mean, how can firms best mitigate against that? Because that's a real problem. We have all the advances in the omni-channel service and delivery. You know, we have a unified view of the customer and all these different things, but if we can't solve the turnover problem, then it might be kind of we're gaining on one hand but losing on the other still.
Can have a huge impact. And people are the most expensive part of running a contact center. If you're facing high turnover rates, that has a huge impact. And it kind of goes to what we talked about a little bit earlier too. If you're a leader in a company, immerse yourself into the life of the contact center agent. Sit by them, just silent monitor what the day in the life is, and it will drive urgency to make changes. I mean, imagine if you were coming to work every day, taking call after call after call, frustrating customers whose local pizza shop knows them better than you do, even though they've been your customer for 5 years.
Sure.
And the tools that you were given are too many and archaic, and you are blind to where the customer is in the journey. And you might even be having to take interactions and overflow scenarios when volumes are high just to meet operational metrics around service level, right? So what can you do about that? I think you can do a couple of really important things. Number one, look at the tools that you're empowering your contact center resources with. Think of leveraging a single omni-channel desktop. I don't know how many times I've done observations where they're copying and pasting from one application to another and to another and trying to buy time with the customer as they do that. It's just really awkward and exhausting.
Or they say something like, oh, my system's being a bit slow today.
Exactly. Exactly. When I think of tools, I also think of how companies are also even starting to adopt things like video engagement. Wouldn't it be a nice change of pace for people in the contact center be able to look the customer in the eye when they're having pretty in-depth conversation about a complex issue, right? So we see more companies adopting things like video engagement as tools to drive better experience for both the customer and the employee. So tools is absolutely key. I think the second of 4 points I want to make here is around skills and knowledge.
Okay.
So don't just assign a skill to a resource in order to handle a particular type of interaction to map the demand. Really align it to it's sort of a mini resume with profile and proficiencies that they've demonstrated through performance excellence over time and through training and proof points that they can excel in that. And that will help to also set a career path for the individual employee too, that they can grow to and aspire to. So it's not just a dead end job where they're always stuck doing the same thing.
Okay.
Third point is about giving them insights. Give them details around their own metrics real time so they can self-monitor, they can judge themselves on the quality of service that they're providing. Give them enough coaching along the way would be the third one. And then I think the fourth one is be agile in giving them choice and preferences as well when it comes to even things like their schedule. Allow them to do shift bidding or enter in their schedule preferences and have a say in what their workday can look like to also make them feel more empowered. So tools, skills, insights, preferences, I think are great ways to drive employee engagement.
You know what, that makes me think, because my next question is actually about the overall agent experience. And I think what you've almost described there are elements in the overall agent experience, and it sort of makes me think about this idea that there's almost like a truth which says, if you want to deliver a great experience and a great service to your customers, you can't really do that unless you've got great people, right? Mm-hmm. And so maybe my question would be is like, should we be devoting the same amount of attention and effort to mapping and designing and improving the overall agent experience as we are to the overall customer experience?
Yes, for the reasons that we just talked about before, and how to do that is again to triangulate around the data that you're seeing, mm-hmm. survey your employees, listen to the quality that they're providing, do observations, interview them, especially if they're exiting, but don't just wait till they're exiting to interview them, get their feedback.
Yeah.
And include them when you do that customer journey mapping, and include them as part of the key stakeholder in providing and optimizing that journey. And again, looking at things like the processes, the tools, the proficiencies that you need to empower the agent with in order to achieve success in the business outcomes that you're driving.
I'm just conscious of time. I know you're a busy mm-hmm. lady. But I've got a couple of questions I want to ask just before we wrap up. The penultimate question is this. So what's the next big thing for contact centers when it comes to improving customer service or experience? Or is it that we've got enough to do and we just need to get through our to-do list? What's the next big thing which is over the horizon that you guys are seeing kind of right now, given that you're on the forefront of some of these kind of future-proof developments, as it were?
Well, certainly we have enough to do, but the market expectations of the customers are only going to continue to accelerate. So we need to stay at pace because the next customer experience revolution is happening right now. I love to think about the future and what that looks like, but I think I'd boil it down to three main change agents that are on the horizon.
Okay.
The first one is around artificial intelligence and the use of machine learning. I think that is already on the cusp when you look at things like chatbots or capabilities provided through IBM Watson and the power that machine learning brings to the table, where nurses out there are using machine learning to diagnose cancer 4 times better than humans, as an example. So mm-hmm. artificial intelligence, I think, is on the cusp. I think the second thing is virtual and augmented reality, especially with the introduction of things like Oculus Rift, partnering with Samsung to link to your phone for just $99 in the US. Mm-hmm. I think that could change the game in customer engagement, as well as even operationally being able to maybe manage your virtual contact centers in a virtual or augmented reality type of way. And I think thirdly is the Internet of Things. I think by 2020, we'll see like billions and billions of devices out there that will drive new engagement models, where you can almost think of these devices themselves as the customer of a company, where they too are sending you interactions, sending you events where they need to be served. And your response to that could be a call to the person wearing that device, or it could be a call to a technician to go fix that device, or interaction or work item that triggers some back office work. So I think that those three things can change the customer experience realm even more so than mobile and social combined. And that presents a big challenge, right? Because as those technologies emerge and become a part of daily lives, as a company, you still need to create exceptional relationships and make employees the champions of that customer experience, and always be ready for change, innovation to differentiate yourselves.
I mean, that's fascinating and interesting and kind of sort of frightening in equal measure.
Yes.
And like going, oh my god, to-do list just got huge. And I guess the challenge is kind of trying to fit in with all this technological advancement, whether it's AI or VR or whatever else is next, machine learning and things. It's almost like, how do we as human beings kind of fit into that to make it even better? Is there anything else that you would like to add, anything that we've missed that you'd like to say before we just kind of wrap up? Because so far it's been awesome.
I think maybe to wrap, as the demand for customization is married with the digital experience and that increases, I think companies must find a path to scalable personalization through the balance of art and science, through the balance of the objective and subjective, with enough human touch as all of this automation becomes mainstream, that customers feel taken care of. So as you embark on that, my advice would be, don't boil the ocean, take a phased approach. Be data and customer centric in all you do, and use experts to help you. Don't try to tackle it all yourself. That would be my 3 tips.
That sounds very, very similar to my little kind of motto, which says, I'm a fan of simplicity and a human touch with a really useful bit of technology thrown in.
Yep, you need both.
Janelle, that's been great and really fascinating and interesting, and hopefully really interesting and useful and engaging for our listeners. So just thank you so much for your time and your insight and your experience with us today. That's been great.
My pleasure, Adrian. Thanks so much.